I stood there in my powder blue mother-of-a-bride dress, clutching the wedding album in my trembling hands as 138 guests fell silent. My daughter's mascara-streaked face twisted with betrayal as I held up the evidence for everyone to see. "This isn't about ruining your special day, Emma," I said, my voice cracking. "It's about saving you from the same nightmare I lived through." The photographer's camera clicked in the silence, capturing the exact moment my only child mouthed the words, "I'll never forget. I will never forgive you for this." But forgiveness wasn't what I was after. Truth was, 312 days. That's how long Emma and Jaden had been engaged before this moment. I remember the night she called me, voice bubbling with excitement, telling me he'd proposed at Bellamy's, the upscale restaurant where they'd had their first date exactly 2 years earlier. "Mom," he got down on one knee right at our table, and the whole restaurant applauded. She had squealed into the phone. I could almost see her face flushed with happiness, eyes sparkling with tears of joy, as she described how he'd hidden the ring in her dessert, how she'd nearly swallowed it. I laughed along with her, pushed down my initial hesitation, and told her how happy I was. Because that's what mothers do, right? We set aside our gut feelings when our children are floating on cloud 9. But there was something about Jaden that had always set my teeth on edge. Call it mother's intuition, call it the hard-won wariness of a woman who's seen 62 years of life, but something in the calculated warmth of his smile never quite reached his eyes. Emma met him through work. She was the marketing director at Cornerstone Financial, and he came in as a high-flying investment consultant from their New York office. Handsome, successful, articulate. On paper, perfect. In person, there was a polished veneer to him that reminded me of the salesman my late husband Bernard used to warn me about. "If they're too smooth, Margaret, they're hiding the rough edges somewhere." Bernie had been gone 6 years by then, pancreatic cancer taking him swiftly and cruelly, but his words of caution still echoed in my mind whenever Jaden visited our home in Connecticut. What was beneath that perfect surface? I couldn't put my finger on it, but something felt rehearsed. Emma had always been our sensible child. Unlike her brother Michael, who chased dreams to California with a guitar and not much else, Emma had steadily built her career, bought her condo by 30, and never rushed into relationships. After that disaster with Scott in college, the boy who cheated on her with her roommate Emma approached dating with cautious deliberation. Until Jaden with him, everything moved at warp speed. 3 months into dating, he was staying at her place 4 nights a week. At 6 months, they were vacationing in Bali. At 10 months, she was wearing a 3-carat diamond. That, I couldn't help but think, was slightly too large, slightly too showy for my practical daughter's slender hand. When I asked if it wasn't all moving a bit fast, Emma bristled. "Mom, I'm 34. When you know, you know." But did she know? Did she really? The engagement party was held at Jaden's sleek downtown apartment, all glass and chrome, and views of the city I could never afford on my retired teacher's pension. His friends were like him, expensive watches, perfect haircuts, conversations about vacation properties and investment portfolios. Emma's college friends huddled together by the cheese plate, looking slightly out of place. I noticed how Emma kept glancing at Jaden throughout the night, as if seeking his approval, adjusting her laugh to match his, interrupting her own stories when he entered the conversation. Small things. Things only a mother might notice. Things that made me wonder if my confident, independent daughter was slowly being remolded into someone else's ideal. "He's just so attentive," Emma had gushed over lunch the following week. "He notices everything, what I wear, how I do my hair. He even laid out an outfit for me before the Peterson client meeting, because he said the blue dress I'd planned wouldn't photograph well with the venue lighting." She said this with admiration, not seeing the red flag waving frantically before my eyes. I took a slow sip of my iced tea, choosing my words carefully. "And you like that kind of guidance?" I asked. She frowned slightly before her face smoothed over. "It's not guidance, Mom. It's partnership. He just wants me to shine." But all I could think was, you were already shining, long before he came along. I held my tongue through the venue selection, an exclusive vineyard I suspected was far beyond Emma's budget, through the guest list negotiations heavy on his business connections, light on her childhood friends, through the cake tastings and flower arrangements where his preferences somehow always prevailed. "He has better taste than I do," Emma would laugh, but the laugh sounded hollow to my ears. Still, I reminded myself that this wasn't my wedding. This wasn't my life. And maybe, just maybe, I was projecting my own failed first marriage onto her happiness. Before Bernie, there had been Richard, my high school sweetheart turned controlling first husband, who had slowly isolated me from friends and family until the day he left me for his 23-year-old secretary, taking half my savings with him. Was I seeing Richard and Jaden unfairly? I promised myself I would try harder, for Emma's sake. The real turning point came exactly 76 days before the wedding. Emma and I were at Bellevue Bridal for her final dress fitting, and Jaden had insisted on coming along. I won't peek at the dress, he'd promised with that perfect white smile. I just want to handle the payment since it's my gift to my beautiful bride. He sat in the waiting area, engrossed in his phone, while Emma stood on the pedestal in her ivory lace gown, looking every inch the fairy tale princess. But when the seamstress stepped out to get a different veil, Emma's composure cracked. "Mom," she whispered, "do you think the neckline is too revealing?" Jaden mentioned he prefers something more modest for the ceremony. I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, accomplished daughter, worrying about a perfectly appropriate sweetheart neckline on her wedding dress because a man thought it might be too revealing. Something inside me snapped. "Emma," I said quietly, "is this the dress you want?" Her eyes darted to the waiting room door, then back to me. The hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "It's beautiful," she finally said. "And it's important to compromise in a marriage, right?" I took her hands in mine, feeling the slight tremble beneath her polished exterior. "Sweetheart, compromise is choosing a vacation destination together, not changing yourself to meet someone else's specifications." Her eyes welled with tears, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw my real daughter beneath the Jaden-approved version. "He loves me, Mom," she whispered fiercely. "He just has certain standards." Standards. The word echoed in my head all the way home. That night, I couldn't sleep. Emma's words, and the fear beneath them, haunted me. At 3:17 a.m., I found myself sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, scrolling through photos of Emma and Jaden on Facebook. Looking for what? I wasn't sure. Evidence, reassurance. In one photo from their engagement party, I noticed a woman in the background, staring at Jaden with an expression I couldn't quite place, something between anger and pain. I zoomed in, but the image became too pixelated to see clearly. Curious, I clicked on the list of people tagged. The woman wasn't identified, but someone had commented below, "Great seeing you and Miranda." Reconnect, Miranda. The name meant nothing to me, but I made a mental note. "Have you ever met any of Jaden's family from Chicago?" I asked Emma casually over the phone the next day, remembering he'd mentioned growing up there. "Not yet," she replied. "His parents are both gone, and he's not close with his extended family. But his old colleague Miranda might come to the wedding. She knew him back in his Chicago days." There it was again. Miranda. "Oh, what does she do?" I kept my tone light. "I'm not sure exactly. Something in finance too. I think, honestly, he doesn't talk much about his past. Says he prefers to focus on our future." That seemed reasonable on the surface, but something about it needled at me. Who doesn't talk about their past with the person they're planning to spend their life with? I wish I could tell you that what happened next was the result of careful detective work or brilliant intuition, but the truth is, it was pure chance, the kind of coincidence that makes you wonder if someone upstairs is looking out for you after all. I was at O'Hare Airport, delayed on my way back from visiting my sister in Phoenix, mindlessly scrolling through a Chicago Tribune article about local business leaders, when a familiar face caught my eye. It was Jaden Younger, with slightly different styling, but unmistakably him, standing beside a woman at some charity gala. The caption read, "Miranda and Jason Winters of Apex Investments at the Children's Hospital. Benefit, Jason, not Jaden. Miranda." That name again. And the woman. She was the same one from the engagement party photo. My heart pounded as I tapped frantically at my phone. Searching Jason Winters Chicago Finance. Results flooded my screen. LinkedIn profiles, business news, charity event photos. In each one, the same man I knew as Jaden Parker smiled back at me. Only here, he was Jason Winters, rising star at Apex Investments, husband to Miranda, father to twins. I felt physically ill, the airport terminal spinning around me as I struggled to process what I was seeing. Had I made a mistake? Was this just someone who looked remarkably like my daughter's fiancé? But deep down, I knew. the slightly crooked incisor when he smiled fully, the small scar near his right eyebrow that he claimed came from a childhood biking accident. This was no doppelganger. This was Jayden. Or rather, Jayden was Jason. I'll tell you the exact moment I knew I had to act, regardless of whether Emma would hate me for it. It was when I found the wedding announcement in the Chicago Tribune archives, dated June 12, 2015, Miranda Lowell and Jason Winters united in marriage at St. Elizabeth's Church. There was no divorce record I could find. The most recent photo of them together at a charity event was from 11 months ago, right before Jayden appeared in my daughter's life. The timing couldn't be coincidental. I sat in that airport chair for 3 hours, digging deeper, taking screenshots, making notes. Who exactly was the man my daughter was about to marry? And more importantly, was he still married to someone else? That night, I couldn't bring myself to call Emma. What would I say? Honey, I think your fiancé is actually a married man with a different name. Without more proof, she would think I'd lost my mind, or worse, that I was deliberately trying to sabotage her happiness. Instead, I did something I never thought I'd do at my age. I hired a private investigator. His name was Frank Delgado, a retired police detective recommended by my neighbor who'd used his services during her divorce. When I walked into his modest office and laid out my suspicions, he didn't look shocked or skeptical. You'd be surprised how common this is, he said, his weathered face impassive. People reinvent themselves all the time. The question is why. Is this enough to go on? I asked, showing him my phone with the screenshots. Frank studied them, nodding. Slowly. It's a start. Good catch with the scar and the tooth. Those are the details people can't easily change. I'll need $3,500 as a retainer. This kind of work takes time, especially if he's crossing state lines. The amount made me wince, nearly a month of my pension, but I wrote the check without hesitation. What was money compared to my daughter's future? I'll be discreet, Frank promised. Last thing we want is to spook him if there's really something to find. As I left his office, a weight settled in my chest, equal parts dread and determination. What if I was right? And God help me, what if I was wrong? Frank worked quickly. Within 2 weeks, he had confirmed that Jason Winters and Jayden Parker were indeed the same person. The birth date matched, though Jayden had been shaving 2 years off his age. The educational background was the same, though Jayden claimed an MBA from Wharton that Jason had never completed. Most damning of all, Frank found no legal name. Change documentation. This wasn't a man running from an old life legitimately. This was someone creating a fraudulent identity. But the biggest bombshell came 3 days later, when Frank called me at 9:37 p.m. Margaret, he said, his voice unusually tight. The wife, Miranda. She filed a missing persons report on Jason Winters 7 months ago. It was withdrawn 2 weeks later. And get this. There's a joint account with over $1.2 million that was drained the day before he disappeared. My blood ran cold. You're telling me he stole from his wife and then, what? Just started a new life with my daughter. Frank's sigh was heavy through the phone. It looks that way. And there's more. I don't think this is his first rodeo. I want you to imagine sitting at your kitchen table at midnight, looking at a folder containing evidence that the man your only daughter is about to marry is not only already married, but possibly a serial con artist who has done this before. Frank had uncovered what appeared to be at least 2 prior identities: David Palmer in Seattle from 2010 to 2012, and Thomas James in San Diego from 2013 to 2014. Both had been involved with wealthy women. Both had disappeared with substantial sums of money. And both had left devastation in their wake. I sat there, cup of tea gone cold, staring at bank statements, social media screenshots, and marriage records until my eyes burned. How could Emma not see through him? But then, how could those other women not have seen through him either? He was good at what he did, finding successful women with assets, isolating them from questioning voices, making them feel special, and then taking everything. The wedding was now just 52 days away. Emma had been distant lately. Our conversation about her dress had created a rift that Jayden seemed all too happy to widen. My calls went to voicemail more often than not. When we did speak, she seemed rushed, defensive. Mom, we're just really busy with wedding stuff and work. And honestly, Jayden thinks you're being a little possessive of me. Possessive? The words stung like a slap. I had given my daughter nothing but independence her entire life, encouraged her career, celebrated when she bought her own home. But now I was possessive for asking basic questions about the man she was marrying. It was textbook isolation, and she couldn't even see it. I needed an ally, someone Emma would listen to. Her brother Michael was the obvious choice, but he and Emma had been on strained terms since he missed her graduate school graduation for a band gig. Still, I had to try. I called him in Los Angeles, where he was now working as a sound engineer, the guitar dreams having evolved into something more practical after all. "Mom, are you sure about this?" he asked after I laid out everything Frank had found. This is crazy, like Lifetime movie crazy." I could hear the skepticism in his voice. "I have documentation, Michael. Photos, records, bank statements showing large withdrawals right around the time he appeared in Emma's life. This isn't me being paranoid." There was a long pause. "Okay, send me what you have, but Mom, if you're wrong about this, you're going to lose her. You know that, right?" I did know. The stakes couldn't be higher. But what kind of mother would I be if I stood by and watched my daughter marry a fraud? Michael called me back 3 hours after I emailed him the files. "Holy shit, Mom. This guy's the real deal, like professional con artist level. Have you gone to the police?" I explained that Frank had advised against it for now. Without Emma's cooperation, and with the prior cases crossing multiple jurisdictions, it would be complicated. And if Jaden caught wind of an investigation before we had Emma somewhere safe, who knew what he might do? "I'm coming home," Michael decided. "I'll book a flight for next week. If we're going to confront Emma with this, we should do it together." Relief flooded through me. I wouldn't have to face this alone. I wish I could tell you that our intervention with Emma went well. I wish I could say she looked at the evidence, thanked us for saving her, and immediately broke off the engagement. But that's not what happened. Michael and I sat her down in my living room, laid out everything as gently as we could, showed her the files Frank had compiled. For a moment, just a moment, I saw doubt flicker in her eyes, but then her face hardened. "Do you know how insane this sounds?" she said quietly. "You hired a private investigator to stalk my fiancé. You're making up wild conspiracies because you can't stand that I'm happy with someone you didn't choose." Michael tried to reason with her. Look at the photos. Look at the timeline. This isn't Mom being paranoid. There's hard evidence here." Emma stood up, gathering her purse. "The evidence of what? Exactly. That Jaden had a life before me. That maybe he changed his name because of some complicated past that is HIS's business to share with me when he's ready. All I see is proof that my own family doesn't trust my judgment." She left without another word, the file of evidence untouched on my coffee table. Michael looked at me helplessly. "What now?" he asked. I felt hollowed out, but somehow calmer than before. "Now," I said, "we find Miranda Winters. If Emma wouldn't listen to us, maybe she would listen to the wife Jaden had abandoned." It was a desperate plan, but we were running out of options. The wedding was now just 39 days away, and invitations had already been sent. "I'll stay in town," Michael promised. "We'll figure this out together." That night, after Michael left for his hotel, I sat alone in my garden, watching fireflies blink in the summer darkness. Emma hadn't returned my call or texts. I felt her slipping away, and the thought was physically painful, like someone was slowly extracting my heart through my ribs. What if my efforts to protect her only ended up destroying our relationship forever? Finding Miranda Winters proved surprisingly simple. She was still at the same address in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood, still working as a financial advisor at the firm where she'd met Jason Jaden. Frank advised caution. "If you approach her directly, she might tip him off," he warned. "Let me reach out through channels. Make sure she's not still in contact with him." The thought hadn't occurred to me. What if they were somehow working together? But the Miranda that Frank eventually spoke with was no accomplice. She was another victim, one whose life had been shattered by the man now planning to marry my daughter. "She's willing to talk to you," Frank reported back 3 days later. "But she won't come to Connecticut, and she won't go to the police. Says she's too embarrassed, and she signed some agreement when she withdrew the missing persons report. An agreement that raised even more questions. Why would she sign anything? What leverage did he have?" Frank's voice was grim. "That's what we need to find out. She'll meet you in Chicago, neutral location. I'd go with you, but But that would be an additional expense I couldn't afford after already paying him $4,700 for his investigation. I understand, I said. I can handle this part. That night, I booked a flight to Chicago for the following Tuesday, exactly 30 days before Emma's wedding. The cafe where I met Miranda was busy, enough to provide anonymity but quiet enough for conversation. I recognized her immediately from the photos, though the vibrant woman from those charity galas had been replaced by someone who seemed diminished somehow, thinner, paler, with a wariness in her eyes that I recognized from my own mirror. "Margaret," she said simply, extending her hand. Her grip was firm despite her fragile appearance. "Thank you for coming all this way." We ordered coffee, made small talk about the weather, the cafe, neutral topics while we assessed each other. Finally, Miranda took a deep breath. "So, he's found his next target." There was no question in her voice, just a flat resignation that broke my heart. "My daughter," I confirmed. "They're getting married in 30 days. Something that might have been either a laugh or a sob escaped her, efficient as always. "It took him 3 months with me." "How long has your daughter known him?" "Just over a year," I replied. Miranda nodded, as if confirming. "A theory. He's getting better at it. More patient." She opened her purse and removed a small flash drive, sliding it across the table. "Everything's on here. Bank records, emails, photos." The police weren't interested. They called it a domestic dispute, since he was legally entitled to our joint accounts. By the time I could prove fraud, he was long gone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pushed the drive toward me. "There were others before me. At least 2 that I know of." He has a type. Successful women with assets, no close family, busy careers that keep them from asking too many questions. The description fit Emma disturbingly well, minus the no close family part, though he'd certainly been working on isolating her from us. "Why did you withdraw the missing persons report?" I asked, the question that had been nagging at me. Miranda's face tightened. "He contacted me. Said if I pursued it, he'd release certain photographs, private ones. Said he'd send them to my colleagues, my clients. I had already lost my savings, my home equity. I couldn't lose my professional reputation too." Anger flared in my chest, not just for this woman, but for all the women this man had manipulated and discarded. "Miranda," I said carefully, "would you be willing to meet with my daughter? Tell her your story directly?" She was already shaking her head before I finished the question. "I can't. The agreement I signed. He's dangerous, Margaret. Not physically violent, but methodical, calculating. He destroys lives and walks away clean. The drive has everything you need, but I can't be involved beyond this." She stood, gathering her coat. "I truly hope you can save your daughter. I wish someone had saved me." On the flight home, I reviewed the contents of Miranda's flash drive on my laptop. What I found made me physically ill. Jason Winters, or whatever his real name might be, had a system, refined over years. He researched his targets thoroughly before approaching them, learned their vulnerabilities, their dreams, their financial situations. With Miranda, he'd spent weeks discovering her favorite wines, books, and vacation spots before coincidentally meeting her at a financial conference. He'd found her weakness, her longing for family after losing both parents young, and exploited it mercilessly, promising her the children she desperately wanted. Then, once married, there were plausible emergencies requiring cash, gradual isolation from friends, and eventually, the complete draining of assets before disappearing. The same pattern was emerging with Emma, right down to his recent suggestions that they should start trying for a baby right after the honeymoon. I arrived home to find my front door unlocked. For one terrifying moment, I thought Jaden had discovered my investigation. But the intruder was Emma, sitting stiffly on my couch. "Michael told me you went to Chicago," she said without preamble, "to meet the woman you think is Jaden's wife." Her voice was cold, controlled. I set down my suitcase, trying to gather my thoughts. "Emma," she cut me off. "I told Jaden everything, Mom, about the investigator, the files, all of it." My blood ran cold. "You what?" She lifted her chin defiantly. "He deserved to know he was being stalked, and you know what? He explained everything. His name was Jason. Yes, he did change it to escape an abusive ex who was stalking him. Miranda is obsessed with him, has been harassing him for years. He changed his name and moved east to get away from her." I stared at my daughter. This smart, capable woman who had been so thoroughly deceived that she was now parroting his lies back to me. Emma, that's not again, she interrupted. He showed me the restraining order he filed against her. Mom, the police reports. She's unstable, dangerous. My mind raced. Restraining order, police reports. Had he actually fabricated official documents? Those must be fake, I said, reaching for my bag to retrieve the flash drive. I have evidence. Emma stood up. Stop it. Just stop. Jaden suggested that maybe you're having some cognitive issues, that we should look into getting you some help. Cognitive issues. He was trying to paint me as mentally unstable, a classic gaslighting technique I recognized from my own experiences with Richard decades ago. I'm not having cognitive issues, I said as calmly as I could. Emma, listen to me. This man has done this before, multiple times. He finds successful women, marries them, drains their accounts, and disappears. I have documentation. She was already walking toward the door. The wedding is in 29 days. You're welcome to attend if you drop this insanity and apologize to Jaden. Otherwise, don't come. The door closed behind her with a quiet click that somehow hurt more than if she'd slammed it. I sank onto the couch, the flash drive clutched in my hand. She hadn't even looked at the evidence. Hadn't given me a chance. Jaden had anticipated my move and countered it perfectly, turning my own daughter against me. For 2 days, I barely left my bed. What was the point? Emma wouldn't listen. The police wouldn't help without her cooperation. And now Jaden knew I was onto him, which made him more dangerous than ever. Michael called repeatedly, but I let the calls go to voicemail. What could I tell him? That we'd failed. That his sister was walking straight into disaster, and there was nothing we could do. On the third day, my doorbell rang at 7:15 a.m. It was Frank, looking grim. You need to see this, he said, handing me his iPad. On the screen was a bank statement, Emma's bank statement. The balance in her primary savings account had dropped from $137,842 to $3,217 overnight, a transfer to an account I didn't recognize. How did you get this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Emma added me to her financial monitoring alerts a few years ago. After that identity theft scare, she probably forgot about it. This came through this morning. He took back the iPad. He's making his move, Margaret, earlier than I expected. Something shifted inside me in that moment, from despair to cold, clear determination. We need to move fast, I said, already reaching for my phone. I'm calling Michael. Frank nodded. I've got a contact at the fraud division of First National. It's not official yet, but they've been tracking similar cases. If we can connect this withdrawal to the Chicago accounts. He didn't need to finish the sentence. If we could prove financial fraud across state lines, that was federal territory. Serious charges. What about Emma? I asked. The worry for my daughter, overwhelming everything else. She's not answering my calls. Frank's expression softened slightly. Let's focus on stopping the money transfer first. That might be the wake-up call she needs. The next 24 hours were a blur of phone calls, emails, and mounting anxiety. Frank's banking contact managed to place a temporary freeze on the transfer while they investigated. But it wouldn't hold for long without Emma's direct involvement. Michael flew back from LA, bringing a friend who worked in cybersecurity to help track the digital trail. And I did the hardest thing I've ever had to do as a mother. I drove to Emma's condo, let myself in with the emergency key she didn't know I still had, and started gathering evidence. Her laptop, financial statements, the prenuptial agreement I found hidden in her desk drawer, an agreement that, upon closer inspection, would have given Jaden access to her retirement accounts and investment portfolio immediately upon marriage. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was possibly illegal. But I also knew my daughter was in danger of losing everything, not just her money, but years of her life to a master manipulator. As I was photographing the prenup, I heard a key in the lock. My heart nearly stopped. I shoved the papers back in the drawer, but there was nowhere to hide in the open-plan living room. The door swung open, and there stood Emma, my Emma, looking exhausted and confused. Mom, what are you doing here? For a split second, I considered lying, but we were beyond that now. Saving you from making the biggest mistake of your life, I said, showing her my phone with the bank transfer details Frank had sent me. Jaden is draining your accounts, Emma. Right now, today. I expected anger, denial. Instead, something crumpled in her face. She sank onto the couch, staring at the phone screen. No, she whispered. He said that was for the honeymoon surprise. A special trip he was planning. I sat beside her, not touching, giving her space to process. Emma, honey, there is no honeymoon surprise. There's just a man who's done this at least 3 times before. A man who has another wife in Chicago, whose money he also took. She looked up, tears streaming now. The restraining order, the police reports. I shook my head gently. Fabricated. I have the real records. Emma Miranda is his victim, not his stalker. Just like the women in Seattle and San Diego before her. Just like you were about to be. Something changed in her eyes then. A spark of the sharp, analytical woman I knew. Show me everything, she said. And I did. The bank records, Miranda's files, Frank's investigation, the prenup I'd found in her drawer. For an hour, she said nothing, just methodically reviewed each piece of evidence, occasionally wiping tears away. Finally, she looked up. He has access to my investment account too. We should check that. Relief flooded through me. She was with me now. We will, I promised. We'll fix this, Emma. She shook her head, a bitter smile twisting her lips. Some things can't be fixed. Mom, my reputation at work, the money I've already spent on this wedding, the humiliation. Her voice broke. God, I was so stupid. I took her hand then, feeling the slight tremble beneath her fingers. You weren't stupid. You were targeted by someone who does this professionally. Someone who has fooled many smart, successful women before you. She pulled her hand away, standing up abruptly. I need to call the bank. And I need to figure out what to tell people about the wedding. The practical Emma was reasserting herself, focusing on tasks, on solutions. We should call the police, I suggested carefully. She shook her head. Not yet. First, I need to make sure he can't take any more of my money. Then I need to talk to him. Alarm shot through me. Emma, that's not safe. He knows we're on to him now. Let the authorities handle this. She turned to me, and I was startled by the cold fury in her eyes. No, Mom, I need to look him in the eye. I need to hear him admit what he did to me. To all of us. I recognized that determination. It was the same stubborn streak that had gotten Emma through her father's death, through college finals, during her breakup with Scott, through every challenge life had thrown at her. But this was different. This man wasn't just a cheating boyfriend or a difficult boss. He was dangerous in ways Emma couldn't fully comprehend. At least don't meet him alone, I pleaded. She considered this, then nodded reluctantly. Fine. You and Michael can be nearby. But this conversation needs to happen, Mom. For me to move on. I need closure. Closure. Such a tidy word for the messy process of extracting yourself from betrayal. But I understood her need. After Richard left me, I had fantasized countless times about confronting him, making him acknowledge what he'd done. I never got that chance. Maybe Emma needed hers. The meeting was set for a coffee shop near Emma's office, public, safe, with Michael and I at a table across the room pretending to be strangers. Emma had texted Jaden, asking to discuss some concerns about the wedding budget. He had agreed readily, perhaps thinking he could smooth over whatever questions she had with his usual charm. When he walked in all confident smile and designer suit, I felt a surge of hatred so intense it frightened me. This man had nearly destroyed my daughter, had destroyed other women's lives, and he looked so ordinary, so harmless. He spotted Emma, his face lighting up with practiced affection as he bent to kiss her cheek. She turned slightly, so his lips grazed her hair instead. A small rebellion, but I felt proud watching it. For 15 minutes, they talked quietly, their expressions giving nothing away to casual observers. Then Emma pushed her phone across the table, showing him something that made his smile falter for the first time. He glanced around the cafe nervously, his eyes skipping past Michael and me without recognition. More words were exchanged, Emma's posture growing stiffer, Jaden's more defensive. Then, suddenly, he stood up, grabbing his coat. Emma reached for his arm, saying something urgent. He shook her off roughly, the charming mask slipping at last, and headed for the door. Michael moved to intercept him, but Emma shook her head slightly. Let him go. As the door closed behind him, Emma sat alone, back straight, staring at nothing. I wanted to rush to her, but respected her need for this moment of private reckoning. When I finally approached her table, Emma looked up with dry eyes. He denied everything at first. Said I was being paranoid, influenced by you. She gave a hollow laugh. Then I showed him the bank freeze notification. That's when he changed tactics, said it was all a misunderstanding, that he was just moving the money temporarily for a better interest rate. She traced the pattern on the table with her finger. When I mentioned Miranda, he changed, like a switch flipped. He told me I'd regret this, that no one would believe me, that I'd look like a jilted, hysterical woman. Her voice hardened. Then he suggested that if I went to the police, certain private photos might find their way to my colleagues at Cornerstone. The same threat he'd used on Miranda, his signature move. We need to go to the authorities now, I insisted, anger burning through me at his threats. He's fleeing as we speak. Emma nodded, some of the shock wearing off. You're right, but Mom, the wedding, all those people, the deposits we can't get back, the humiliation. I took her hand. We'll figure it out together, one step at a time. Michael joined us, placing a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. I followed him outside, got his license plate number. Frank's contact can track it if we need to. My children, united again in crisis. Despite everything, I felt a surge of gratitude for that, at least. The next week was a whirlwind of police reports, bank investigations, and painful phone calls to wedding vendors and guests. Emma insisted on making the calls herself, offering a vague explanation about irreconcilable differences discovered too late. Some people were understanding. Others pressed for gossip. A few of Jaden's business friends were openly hostile, suggesting Emma was making a terrible mistake. Through it all, she maintained a dignity that made my heart swell with pride, even as it broke for her pain. I keep thinking about Miranda, Emma confessed one night as we sat in my kitchen, surrounded by cancelled wedding invoices. And the others, how many lives has he ruined? And he'll just move on, find someone new, start over. Injustice of it hung in the air between us. 20 days before what would have been her wedding day, we received news that Jaden Winters Parker had been located trying to cross into Canada with false identification. The financial fraud charges from Chicago had caught up with him, along with new charges related to Emma's accounts. They want you to testify, I told Emma gently, showing her the email from the prosecutor. She stared at the message for a long moment. Will Miranda testify? Too, I nodded. They've contacted her, and apparently, there's a woman from Seattle as well. Emma's jaw tightened with resolve. Then I'll do it. For all of us. In that moment, my daughter looked like a warrior to me, wounded but unbowed, finding purpose in her pain. The decision to go ahead with an event on the original wedding date was Emma's idea. I've paid for the venue, the food, my dress, she reasoned. Why let it all go to waste? Not a wedding, but a reclamation, a celebration of dodging a bullet. I was skeptical at first. Wouldn't it just remind her of what she'd lost? But Emma was insistent. I refused to let him take one more thing from me. Mom, not even a day I was looking forward to. So invitations were sent out again, not to all 138 original guests, but to a smaller circle of true friends and supportive family. A celebration of truth and new beginnings, the simple cards read. No gifts requested, just presence and support. The venue, a garden terrace at the vineyard, looked beautiful that day. Different flowers than originally planned, simpler arrangements. Emma wore a blue dress instead of the wedding gown she'd returned. There was music, food, even dancing. But before any of that, Emma stood before the gathered guests and told her story. Not every detail, but enough. I was deceived by someone I trusted completely, she said, her voice clear and strong. I'm not the first, but with your help, I'm determined to be one of the last, she explained. About the upcoming trial, about the support group she was forming for victims of romantic fraud. What was meant to be my wedding day is instead my Independence Day, she finished, raising a glass, to truth, no matter how painful, and to all of you who helped me find it. Later, as the celebration continued around us, Emma found me sitting alone by the reflecting pool. Thank you, she said simply, taking my hand, for not giving up on me, even when I pushed you away. I squeezed her fingers. That's what mothers do, sweetheart. We see the danger even when you can't. She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes for the first time in weeks. I've been thinking, she said, after the trial, I might take some time off, maybe travel. find myself again. The thought of her leaving brought a pang, but I nodded encouragingly. Whatever you need to heal. She looked out over the garden, the fairy lights twinkling as dusk fell. You know what's strange? I'm actually grateful, in a way. This whole awful experience showed me who's really in my corner, showed me my own strength. She turned back to me, and I found out exactly what I'm made of. 3 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse, watching Jason Winters, his real name, as it turned out, being sentenced to 8 years for fraud across multiple states. Emma sat beside me, holding hands with Miranda Winters, the two women having formed an unlikely bond through their shared experience. The Seattle victim, Diane, sat on Miranda's other side, 3 women united by one man's deception, now united in their determination to see justice done. As the judge announced the sentence, Emma let out a long breath. It's really over, she whispered. But we all knew better. The legal proceedings might be over, but the healing was just beginning. Today marks 1 year since what should have been Emma's wedding day. She did take that time to travel, 3 months, backpacking through Europe, finding herself again. Now she's back at Cornerstone, promoted to vice president, and running a monthly support group for fraud victims that's grown from 3 women to nearly 30. Last week, she brought a date to Sunday dinner, her first since Jason. David is a history teacher at the local high school, quiet and thoughtful, the opposite of flashy. They're taking things slowly, and Emma insists they will be just friends for at least 6 months before considering anything more. She's cautious now, but not closed off. Wounded, but healing. As for me, I've learned things too. I've learned that a mother's instinct is worth trusting, even when it seems irrational. I've learned that love sometimes means risking someone's anger to protect them from greater harm. And I've learned that family, real family, can survive even the most painful tests. If your instincts are screaming that something isn't right with someone your loved one trusts, don't ignore that voice. Look deeper, ask questions, find evidence. Stood there in my powder blue dress at what should have been my daughter's wedding, choosing truth over comfort, risking everything to protect her. I would do it again in a heartbeat. Wouldn't you do the same for someone you love? Leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done in my situation. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories. I'm Margaret from Connecticut, and this has been the hardest chapter of my life to share, but maybe, just maybe, it will help someone else write a different ending to their story.